Hello, Lightning Tamers. Percy here. I'm going to go over with you guys on kind of wrapping up the conclusion of my time at the Glass Axis studio. And what that job entailed was a contracted work to set up their neon equipment. You see, they had done a class back in June with Ashley Goodwin, who I had a recording with recently. And they were trying to put two pieces of equipment together to get this class running, which they had all the torches and everything ready for. But when they tried to get it to run, they had some issues with leaks, and things just weren't set up and ready to pump their pieces when it came down to it. So they have me come in and basically assess the system, leak check it, and then work on getting into a working condition. Now, they've contacted me about a year ago when they first received one part of that donation, and I just wasn't ready yet. I didn't have the knowledge yet. I didn't have the experience. I didn't have the connections to make it happen. It was just kind of like, this is how it goes. You tend to learn when you needed to. You learn what you needed to, and it just takes time, especially if your full profession isn't engaged in all these things. But this is what my interest is in. This is what Taming Lightning is about, just learning about these different things to be able to make it happen, both on the crafting side of making the art, both on the, I guess, technology or engineering side, understanding the technology that goes into it, and then discovering the alchemy, the kind of magical properties of making the stuff light up. Um, so here we go. I'm using all my Instagram kind of posts to kind of reiterate that, and I'll make a final vlog video of this for you guys. But in general, when I got there, it was first time visiting Columbus, Ohio, first time visiting Glass Axis, and kind of surveyed all the stuff they had. So the first task was to get the sensor hooked up, and so to do that, I had to make a little KF flange, which is soft glass. They had a soft glass component. Usually, nowadays we use borosilicate, but you go back far enough, they had soft glass everything, and soft glass is very temperamental. You have to be very careful in heating it slowly, the right temperature, all that things, flame type, just to get everything nice and good. And I had practiced that through my experience at the Glass Center, learning from Sally Prash, from Tim Dreyer. I mean, the Pittsburgh Glass Center is a nice nexus for all these different things. So after completing that, you can see a little scuzzing right there. That's reduction where the metals in the glass, the soft glass is kind of coming to the surface, but I checked it so it was leak free. Next, it was taking that sensor and attaching everything with a little compressor here and a what do you call it, a O-ring, and gave it a little bit of a cleanup and a little bit of a grease just to kind of make sure it was a good seal for that. And when I say grease, I'm talking about vacuum grease, low outgassing material that helps you create a good vacuum. Even though normally this O-ring would not need one, I want to make sure, because I'm using just this setup, just a tiny bit, like a thin layer of that stuff. So after setting that up, I was able to use the sensor, and this is for the gauge for the microns. It allows you to basically understand the vacuum below 1 torr. So in the very small vacuum ranges, which is rough vacuum, you're not doing something like super scientific, which requires a much greater pump and much greater sensitive sensor and gauge. So the next thing I really had to do was now start the leak check. Now I had a gauge up there that could read below torr. I can actually see where it's pulling down to, and making sure that we have the vacuum that they said that they were getting. So up here was the kind of Y splitter, and that Y splitter allows you to have two pieces hooked up to the system at the same time. And I figured that we may have an issue with that. So just to eliminate all that problem with trying to just fix that one thing and work my way back towards the system here, I was going to lock this all off and then make sure there was nothing back here. And then I'm going to play a quick video here. Essentially, the part that was having an issue was this Y splitter. See, it's a Y shape. This area where there's a lot of reduction, there's a chance for there to be like the metals opening up and creating tiny little pockets where there's just not a perfect seal for your piece. So at that point, I had opted to propose making it myself and making it out of boros. So if it does get broken, it's easier to fix. It's easier to change out the little tubulations here, the small 6 to 5 millimeter tubing out. You just replace it without having to go all the way back and creating a long stress line along here. And it'd just be easier. You can replace the electrode if it gets dirty or whatever. You can replace the parts on there, and there's definitely resources for that. So I want to move to the next slide here, where I go back to the Pittsburgh Glass Center, and I start to design and make the Y splitter. Now, I don't have all the threading stuff on here. I had to go to a local scientific glass blower at the University of Pittsburgh in order to be consulted on what I needed, and to purchase those parts. But through working with this scientific glass blower, I learned what I needed, and especially reinforced that through talking with Sally Prash and Tim Dreyer, because you can't just make these by hand. These have a special tool to make those threads on there. So, working through this was the first time I made something like this, but I have been doing seals constantly and consistently and improving over time, doing the same, if not similar seal, just getting your heat ready, approaching it from a comfortable angle and taking your time and really, really making sure everything's nice and clean. Then I had to leak check it, and I hooked it up to my vacuum system. And this is where you had to really become creative. Because I didn't have the same size fitting at the end of that tube as mine, I had to bring it through the tubulation section and check everything from there. Putting in the electrode, putting in the caps, plugging up the back end with a cork, and I'm looking to get something down to 5 microns, especially with a cork like that. If it's good, boom, I'm excellent, I can move on. If not, I have to fix it. And fix it I did. So using right now is a Tesla coil and pulling this under vacuum. Essentially, you have a little bit of, essentially for an arc to happen through air, it's just too dense. The less molecules there are, the easier for a small amount of electricity to travel further. Imagine those air molecules being resistance. The less resistance, the more things can travel. Like you can walk through no water, and then it's harder to walk through water up to your knees. That's the kind of reference I'm looking here. That's how we understand that arc traveling through that piece. So unfortunately, I did have a leak there, and you kind of see where it lights up there. It's a tiny little spot. You wouldn't be able to see with a microscope. You can't see with your eye, and that's why I'm using this tool. But there's no problem with that. I actually looked at that piece again and again, and I realized that I had an uneven thickness, which would contribute to a little tiny hole somewhere where you're trying to pull that material off and blow it out, and then it turns out it's too thin of a wall, or you got some dirt on the surface of the glass, or maybe you just made it too thin or something like that. And that was the easy fix. I simply I picked out that piece of glass if there's any impurity or dirt on there, and then I added a dollop of glass and melted that nicely in, and then it was good to go. So I was primed to set it up in the system, packed everything up, and went off on my merry way. So I returned maybe 2 weeks after that. So 1 week, I went for 1 day to assess the system. Then I took a week to figure out what parts I need to get those parts, and then make this Y splitter. And then I come back for 2 days, and that was just really finishing up the setup. So in this case, I was going to transform this, which is what I had saw before I came in, before I started doing anything, and making it to this. Essentially, the difference is you have to get rid of a lot of clutter. You can't just have a whole bunch of stuff everywhere. When you're working with this serious material in a serious medium, when you have electricity going here and there, and you have your gauges and everything sitting on this side, you need to be able to see everything. You need to be able to access things without getting anything in your way. So the first thing you remove is we took away this little shelf that wasn't needed to be there, and we didn't need this oil gauge because we already had a gauge that can read to the torr and read microns. So we only needed these two devices over here, and it just kept everything easier. next thing we had to figure out was how are we going to hook up the tanks, because if you look back here, there was no space to set that up. And I remember seeing from someone's shop they had little washers um, holding down their tanks, and so that's what we did. It's quite sturdy. It's not a problem. You can't really knock it over unless you're drop kicking the thing, and then mounting the little needle valves on the plate. Um, what we did find is that when everything was set up, everything worked perfectly fine, except for there was a little compression cap that was cracked, and we'd have to replace that. Um, and that's easy. They can go and purchase that from Chem Glass for like $11. Just that the cap was cracked, and I think they had that, and by the time we found that piece, I wasn't able to get that ahead of time. But seeing that it's very easy to order and relatively inexpensive, they can definitely do that, and they won't need my assistance for that any further. So everything was fine and dandy. And then they asked me to kind of work through showing the tech how to do mercury traps. And I just picked up a book, The Neon Techniques, 4th edition, which is edited by Wayne Strapman, and kind of pulled open a page and gave a few practices. And essentially that's what you would make. Since then I've gotten some tips and some tutorials about that. But essentially at the end of this game here, or end of this job, this is all that I could do. I came in, verified there was a leak, found a solution for that leak, fabricated a Y splitter for that so that it's easy to repair and replace, gave them the parts list of what that would be, set up their workspace so it's easy to see and access, and pretty much what they have to do next, and I suggested to them, was provide them contact information of Rusty Rousseau. Rusty has 35 plus years and experience in Neon. He was part of working with developing the standard procedures for Neon that many people use today, and has seen many different systems. So they would need someone to train them professionally how to use the bombarding system they do have there, and train them to do Neon, because I'm not saying teach them, I'm saying train them, because the bombarder is a very serious piece of equipment and something I don't have experience with. And that's the one thing you have to learn when you're doing stuff like this. You need to know what your limits are, and you know how to push your limits to the next level. For me, this is a job that I've never quite done before. I've done a lot of different things that were similar, especially with my own system, but nothing that I came to a space for that. But having seen other people's rigs, having asked questions, having visited various studios, it all came together when it needed to. But admitting that I didn't have the bombarding experience and providing the next steps, that's just part of professional courtesy, knowing where your knowledge ends and where the next person would begin. And that's how you keep stuff going forward. There's no stopping it and just saying you don't have any idea what to do next. If you don't have the experience, have an idea of who they can contact next, or have someone to recommend. It's just part of the job. Thank you guys for tuning in for this. Hope you guys enjoyed my journey through this commission work, and I hope to bring you guys more things in the future. So again, I'm testing out this new system where I'm recording through my screen and providing imagery and stuff like that. So expect more advances in that aspect, and I'll see you guys next time.